It was the evening before Thanksgiving, and the air had the crisp chill that only late autumn in the western plains could bring. The sun had dipped behind rolling hills, leaving streaks of amber and gold fading into the night. The long dirt road leading to the Miller Ranch was empty, except for the occasional caw of a crow, echoing across the farmland. Along this road, a woman trudged forward, her shoulders hunched beneath the weight of the world, her breath visible in the cold air. She carried 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, each barely holding on to their mother's hand, their small feet barely keeping pace with her uneven stride. Their clothes were tattered, patched in several places, and their faces were smudged with dirt from a journey far too long for such tiny legs. Hunger had drawn lines of worry and fatigue across their young faces, and their mother's eyes, though filled with desperation, burned with determination. She had heard of the rancher, a man reputed for his generosity, fairness, and courage, and in the hopes of finding warmth and food, she approached the gate, her knuckles rapping weakly on the rough wood. Inside the ranch house, Thomas Miller, a widower and the sole caretaker of the vast property, was finishing up chores for the day. The smell of burning wood and the faint aroma of fresh bread wafted through the air, mingling with the scents of cattle and hay from the barn. His life had been a solitary one for years, punctuated only by his daily duties and the occasional visit from townsfolk. Yet there was a certain rhythm to his existence, one defined by integrity, hard work, and quiet reflection. The sound of knocks on the door, especially at this hour, was unusual. Thomas set down the broom he had been using to sweep the porch and wiped his hands on a cloth. When he opened the door, he was met with the sight of a woman, ragged and pale, holding the hands of 3 children, who clung to her like fragile anchors in a storm. His heart tightened at the sight. He could see immediately the evidence of hardship etched into their eyes and posture. "Evening, ma'am," he said gently, his voice steady but warm. "What things you out here on a night like this?" The woman swallowed, her throat dry. "Sir, I'm sorry to trouble you. It's my children. We have nowhere to go. We haven't eaten in days. I heard you might help." Thomas didn't hesitate. Without a word, he stepped aside and gestured toward the warmth of the house. "Come in. Sit at the table. You'll find warmth, and we'll see to some food first." The children's eyes widened in disbelief. They had seen kind faces before, but kindness like this was a rare treasure. The eldest, a girl of 9, whispered a hesitant, "Thank you, sir," while the youngest clutched his mother's coat and simply stared, too shy and hungry to speak. Inside, the house was simple but cozy, with a fire crackling in the hearth. The wooden floors were polished from years of care, and the walls were adorned with photographs of a family long gone but never forgotten. Thomas moved quickly, instructing the children to sit at the large oak dining table while he fetched bowls and utensils. He placed a steaming loaf of bread in the center, followed by a pot of thick stew made from the few vegetables and meat he had saved for the holiday. The children's eyes sparkled with hope and hunger as the smells wafted toward them. "What's your name, little ones?" Thomas asked gently, kneeling so his eyes were level with theirs. "Lily, Anna, and Tom," the eldest replied, her voice trembling but clear. Their mother stood behind them, hands folded tightly in front of her, watching this man who had opened his home without a second thought. Thomas nodded. "Well, Lily, Anna, Tom, tonight this table is yours. Eat. You're safe here." The woman felt tears prick her eyes. The relief she felt was almost unbearable. She had been running from desperation, hunger, and uncertainty for weeks. The idea that they were finally welcomed, no questions asked, no judgment passed, was a balm for her weary spirit. She set the children in their chairs, the youngest sitting in the lap of their mother, as he nibbled cautiously at the crust of the bread. Thomas returned with a ladle of stew, filling bowls until the warmth of the food radiated not only through their bodies, but through their souls. As they ate, Thomas spoke softly to them, asking about their journey, their home, and their dreams. He listened carefully, his attention never faltering. The children began to relax, laughter bubbling timidly from the eldest, while the mother allowed herself a sigh she hadn't breathed in weeks. Here, at this simple table in a rancher's home, there was an unspoken promise, a promise of safety, of nourishment, and of a reprieve from the relentless hardship they had endured. The night grew darker outside, but inside the ranch house, the fire crackled, bowls emptied, and hearts warmed. The act of opening his home to strangers on the eve of Thanksgiving was more than charity. It was a reminder of the power of human kindness and compassion. Thomas Miller had no idea how this single gesture would alter the course of their lives, weaving their fates together in ways that neither he nor the woman could have imagined. By the time the last piece of bread was gone and the children's eyes were heavy with sleep, the woman felt a profound sense of gratitude. She realized that this night, the night she had arrived at the ranch with nothing but hope, had become a turning point. The rancher had given her more than food. He had given her a glimpse of hope, a sense of belonging, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, compassion could illuminate the path forward. The rancher, Thomas Miller, had always been a man of habit, the routines of his daily life as comforting as the walls of his home. But the arrival of a weary woman and 3 children had shifted that routine in ways he didn't yet fully understand. After ensuring they had a warm meal and a safe place to rest, he suggested that they prepare together for the upcoming Thanksgiving celebration, a holiday that in his solitude had always been quiet, personal, and reflective. Yet, tonight, it felt right to involve them, to let them see not only the warmth of food, but the warmth of human connection. The children, still sleepy from their long journey, followed him cautiously. Thomas guided them to the kitchen, a large and welcoming space with wooden counters, gleaming copper pots, and shelves lined with jars of preserved fruits and vegetables. The eldest girl, Lily, was given a small task, washing the vegetables in the sink. Anna, the middle child, helped tear bread for stuffing while the youngest, Tom, cautiously explored the pantry, his small fingers tracing jars of flour and sugar. Their mother watched quietly, overwhelmed by the simple kindness that seemed to permeate every corner of the house. It was a stark contrast to the harsh, lonely life they had been forced to endure, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe freely. Thomas moved among them, guiding their hands gently, showing them how to peel potatoes without cutting themselves, how to mix ingredients in rhythm, how to taste the seasoning and adjust it with care. He spoke with patience, never raising his voice, always encouraging. In the process, laughter began to replace the tension that had clung to their small bodies for weeks. A dropped potato or a spilled bowl of flour became moments of shared amusement rather than frustration. As they worked, the children asked questions, their curiosity piercing the silence that had so long surrounded their lives. "Why do you live all alone, sir?" Lily asked softly, her wide eyes full of wonder. Thomas paused for a moment, considering how to answer without causing sadness. "I used to have a family," he said quietly. "But sometimes life changes the plans we make. That's why I'm glad you're here. Tonight, this house is full of family again." The mother, Emily, felt her heart tighten at his words. She had spent weeks, even months, worrying about the future of her children. Their journey had been one of uncertainty, facing closed doors, rejection, and the constant gnaw of hunger. And now, in this unexpected sanctuary, she felt hope stirring for the first time in weeks. She found herself smiling, helping her children as they moved about the kitchen, feeling a sense of normalcy that had long been absent. The evening continued with a rhythm of preparation, laughter, and storytelling. Thomas recounted tales of his own childhood on the ranch, lessons learned from hard work, encounters with townsfolk, and the small adventures that had shaped his life. The children listened in awe, occasionally giggling at the more amusing stories. Emily, too, shared fragments of her own past, speaking carefully of the hardships they had endured, yet allowing the rancher and the children to see the resilience that had kept her going. Once the food was nearly ready, Thomas guided the children in setting the table. The large oak dining table, polished from years of care, became a place of connection. Napkins were folded, plates were placed just so, and the smallest details, like arranging flowers in a jar, were attended to with pride. The simple act of preparing a meal together had become more than a task. It was a ritual of trust, a signal that they belonged, if only for this night. By the time the meal was ready, the house was filled with the savory aroma of roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and a simmering stew. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the kitchen and dining room. Thomas called everyone to the table, and for a moment, they paused, taking in the scene before them. The mother's eyes glistened with tears, but she smiled, understanding the significance of this moment. This was more than just a meal. It was a declaration of safety, of belonging, of family, in its truest form. As they sat together, passing dishes and serving one another, the children's laughter continued to rise, and Thomas found himself moved by the simplicity of the joy. Emily joined in, guiding her children, sharing in the tasks, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The night had become a bridge, connecting strangers with acts of care, with shared effort, and with the unspoken understanding that kindness could create family where none had existed. After the meal, Thomas led them to the living room, where blankets and pillows had been arranged in front of the hearth. He suggested that they tell stories before bed, a tradition he had long maintained in solitude. The children eagerly shared little tales of their past adventures, and Thomas joined in, weaving in stories of his own childhood. Emily, watching this small circle of warmth and connection, felt a profound gratitude for this man who had opened his home and heart to her and her children. As the night wore on, and the fire burned low, the children drifted off to sleep in their new beds, the mother beside them, and Thomas felt a quiet contentment settle over the ranch. This was more than hospitality. It was the beginning of a bond, a trust forged through simple acts of care, shared effort, and the acknowledgement of their shared humanity. The night before Thanksgiving had transformed from a time of anxiety and fear into a sanctuary of warmth, hope, and newfound family. By the time Thomas finally stepped outside to close the barn for the night, the stars had begun to pierce the sky, shining down on a world that seemed a little kinder, a little brighter. Inside, a small family, once strangers, now connected through shared labor, laughter, and compassion, slept peacefully, a promise of hope for the days to come. This first night at the ranch had proven that even the simplest acts of generosity could create bonds that were strong enough to endure hardship that had once seemed insurmountable. The first rays of the morning sun spilled over the horizon, painting the plains with warm gold and soft amber hues. The chill in the air was sharper than the night before, but inside the ranch house, the atmosphere radiated warmth and comfort. The smell of burning wood mingled with the scent of fresh hay from the barn, carrying a sense of rustic home life that was soothing and familiar. Emily stirred first, careful not to wake her children. She glanced over at them, sleeping peacefully in the beds provided for the first time, and felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she allowed herself to believe that her family had finally found a safe place, a home. Thomas was already awake, tending to the morning chores. He fed the horses, checked on the cattle, and ensured the fire in the hearth burned steadily. He believed in starting the day with purpose, a habit cultivated from years of solitary ranch life. But today, the ranch held a different energy, an energy of life, laughter, and anticipation. When Emily and the children came down to the kitchen, Thomas greeted them warmly, a smile tugging at the corners of his face. "Good morning," he said. "Ready for Thanksgiving?" The children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, nodded eagerly. The table, already polished and ready, awaited their small hands to set plates, utensils, and napkins. Emily tied her apron, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, feeling a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. Today was more than a meal. It was an opportunity to create memories, to rebuild a sense of belonging, and to acknowledge a kindness that had changed the course of their lives overnight. The morning unfolded with a rhythm of shared preparation. Thomas guided the children in chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and kneading dough for bread. Emily, though exhausted, felt a sense of purpose she had not known in months. She laughed alongside her children, her voice blending with theirs in the small kitchen that had become a sanctuary. The eldest, Lily, took pride in arranging the bread baskets and ensuring the youngest, Tom, stayed safe near the table. Anna, with her careful hands, helped season the stew, learning from Thomas how a pinch of salt here and a sprinkle of herbs there could transform a simple meal into a feast. Between tasks, conversation flowed easily. Thomas shared stories of past Thanksgivings, of family gatherings long ago, and of the lessons learned from the land. Emily shared fragments of their journey, the struggles, the nights without food, and the fear of being turned away. Yet she also shared moments of hope, of resilience, and of her dreams for a future where her children would know safety and love. The children listened intently, absorbing the warmth and security that now surrounded them. Through these exchanges, trust deepened, and the invisible walls between strangers began to dissolve. As the meal came together, the ranch became alive with the sounds of laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the aroma of food simmering on the stove. Thomas paused for a moment, looking at Emily and the children as they worked together. He felt a swell of emotion, a mix of pride, joy, and compassion. This Thanksgiving was unlike any he had experienced before. The presence of the family had transformed the house from a solitary retreat into a home brimming with life. Finally, The table was set. A hearty feast awaited them. Roasted vegetables, savory stew, fresh-baked bread, and a small dessert pie, its crust golden and flaky. Candles flickered in the center, casting a gentle glow that reflected in the children's wide eyes. Thomas invited everyone to sit, and for a moment, silence fell over the group. Not from tension, but from awe. The children marveled at the bounty before them. Emily's eyes glistened with tears of gratitude, and Thomas felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had helped create this moment of connection. Before eating, Thomas suggested they take a moment to express gratitude, a tradition he held dear. Each person, from the oldest to the youngest, shared a simple thought: thanks for food, for safety, for kindness, for being together. When it was Emily's turn, she spoke with quiet emotion. "I'm thankful for this home, for your kindness, and for a chance to give my children a moment of peace and happiness." Her words resonated deeply, not only with Thomas, but also with the children, who felt their hearts swell with comfort and hope. The meal itself was a celebration, not just of food, but of connection. Laughter rang through the room as they passed dishes, shared stories, and exchanged small jokes. The children felt seen and valued. Their mother felt supported. And Thomas felt the warmth of family in a way he hadn't for years. Every bite of food became a symbol of trust, of shared effort, and of the joy that comes from giving without expectation. After the meal, Thomas invited the children to explore the ranch under his watchful eye. They ran through the yard, their laughter echoing against the barn walls and open fields. Emily walked beside Thomas, talking quietly, learning more about the land, about his life, and about the man who had opened his home without hesitation. Trust deepened between them, an understanding forming that went beyond words. It was a connection born of compassion, shared labor, and the recognition of humanity in each other. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch, the family returned to the warmth of the house. The children were tired, but happy, their cheeks flushed with the cold air and the joy of freedom. Emily settled them by the fire, brushing their hair and telling them stories until their eyes grew heavy. Thomas watched quietly, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent, a day where lives had been touched, bonds had been formed, and hope had been restored. Thanksgiving Day ended not just with full bellies, but with hearts full of gratitude, love, and connection. The ranch, once a place of solitude for Thomas, had become a home in the truest sense. A place where kindness, compassion, and family converged. This day, marked by simple acts of care, shared stories, and the warmth of home, would linger in their memories as the moment their lives began to change forever. The days following Thanksgiving were filled with a quiet rhythm of life on the ranch. The children awoke early with the sun, their laughter echoing through the corridors of the house as Emily prepared breakfast. Thomas carried on with his work, tending the fields, caring for the livestock, and ensuring the ranch remained a sanctuary of stability. But the idyllic routine was soon punctuated by small crises that tested the resilience of their newly formed bonds. The first challenge arrived on a gusty morning, when a sudden storm swept over the plains. Dark clouds rolled in quickly, lightning flashed across the sky, and rain began to fall in torrents. The children, unaccustomed to such wild weather, clung to their mother in fear. Thomas acted immediately, securing animals in the barn, closing gates, and guiding Emily and the children to safety inside the house. He reassured them with calm words, steady hands. and a quiet confidence that helped to calm their frayed nerves. The storm raged outside, but inside, the warmth of the fire and Thomas's presence created a sense of safety. The children, still trembling from the storm, slowly relaxed as they realized that in this home, they were protected. Emily watched Thomas move through the storm with ease and care, her heart filling with gratitude and admiration. She had encountered men before, but none had offered such steadfast protection without expectation or judgment. In the midst of the storm, she began to see Thomas not just as a rancher, but as someone who could provide the security and stability she had longed for. Someone capable of forming the foundation for a future where her children could thrive. Another challenge arose shortly after, when Tom, the youngest child, fell ill with a fever. Emily panicked at first, feeling helpless despite her best efforts. Thomas immediately took charge, fetching herbs, preparing warm broths, and ensuring the boy remained hydrated and comfortable. He stayed by his side, keeping vigil through the night while Emily rested beside him, exhausted but comforted by Thomas's unwavering attention. The act of caring for Tom became a silent lesson in trust and partnership. Emily realized that she was not alone in the responsibility of raising her children. During these challenges, small but meaningful moments of bonding emerged. Lily learned to ride a horse under Thomas's patient guidance, gaining confidence as she navigated the wide-open fields. Anna assisted Emily in the kitchen, learning recipes and sharing stories about her own childhood dreams. The children began to see Thomas as more than just a provider. He became a mentor, a protector, and a part of their family. Emily, observing these interactions, felt a deepening respect and connection. She began to trust him with not only their safety, but with their hearts. Even routine chores became opportunities for bonding. Mending fences together, gathering firewood, or tending to animals became moments of teamwork. Each small task reinforced the idea that family is built not just on shared love, but shared effort, patience, and mutual support. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had transformed into a space where cooperation and care thrived. The children laughed more freely, Emily smiled more often, and Thomas felt a quiet joy that had been absent from his life for years. Amid these challenges, moments of tenderness emerged naturally. Thomas helped Emily with heavy lifting, offering gentle encouragement and guidance without ever demanding recognition. He listened attentively when she spoke of her past struggles, never interrupting or judging. Emily, in turn, became more confident in her own abilities, learning to trust not only Thomas, but herself. The children, seeing this partnership in action, felt secure in the knowledge that their family was stronger together than apart. One afternoon, after the storm had passed and Tom had recovered, Thomas invited Emily and the children to explore a hidden trail behind the ranch. The path led to a small hill that overlooked the fields, the river, and the barn they had grown to love. As they reached the top, the children gasped at the view, their eyes wide with wonder. Thomas smiled, watching them take in the beauty of the land. Emily felt a quiet sense of awe herself, realizing that this was more than just a physical journey. It symbolized the journey of their family, overcoming challenges, finding strength in one another, and discovering hope in unexpected places. Even as difficulties arose, the bonds within the ranch household continued to grow. The children learned the value of patience, resilience, and trust. Emily learned that accepting help was not a weakness, but a path to a better future. And Thomas, who had once lived in solitude, discovered the fulfillment that comes from being a guardian, mentor, and father figure. These challenges, though difficult, had become catalysts for love, trust, and a profound sense of belonging. By the time the first snowfall of the season arrived, the family had grown inseparable. They celebrated small victories, a repaired fence, a successful harvest, a healthy child, and these triumphs became symbols of their collective strength. The ranch was no longer merely a home for Thomas. It was a sanctuary for Emily and her children, a place where hardships could be faced together, and where love and support flourished in every corner. Through each trial, the lesson became clear. Family is not defined solely by blood, but by the care, protection, and commitment shared among those who choose to stand together. Thomas had shown that kindness and courage could form the foundation of a new family, while Emily had demonstrated resilience and trust that allowed the bond to deepen. The children thrived in this environment, gaining confidence, joy, and a sense of security that had long been absent from their lives. By the end of the season, the ranch was alive with the presence of this newfound family. Challenges remained, as life on the plains was never easy, but they faced them with unity and courage. The trials had forged bonds stronger than fear, hardship, or uncertainty. The ranch had become a home, not just in structure, but in spirit, a place where love, trust, and belonging were abundant, and where every member of the household had a role in sustaining it. Winter had settled over the plains, dusting the fields with snow and frosting the roofs of barns and houses with a delicate white layer. The days were shorter, the nights longer, and the wind carried a chill that reminded everyone of the hardships that came with life on the frontier. Yet inside the Miller Ranch, warmth and light prevailed, spilling from windows and hearths into the cold night. For Thomas, Emily, and her children, this season represented more than the biting cold. It symbolized the endurance of human kindness, the growth of trust, and the birth of a family forged from compassion and shared experience. Months had passed since the mother and children had first arrived, weary and hungry, at the ranch. Lily, Anna, and Tom had grown healthier, stronger, and more confident, their cheeks rosy with the combination of fresh air, nourishing meals, and the joy of feeling safe. They moved freely around the ranch, exploring fields, helping with animals, and learning the rhythms of life from Thomas and Emily. The children had come to see the rancher as a father figure, a protector and mentor who had stepped in when they needed him most. Emily, for her part, had grown to trust Thomas not only with their safety, but with her heart, recognizing in him a partner who shared her values, her dreams, and her dedication to family. The household had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings began with chores, breakfasts were shared together, and afternoons were filled with exploration and education. Thomas taught the children practical skills, riding horses, tending to livestock, and understanding the cycles of nature, while Emily ensured they were nurtured emotionally, sharing stories, lessons, and tender guidance. Their evenings were often spent around the fire, reading, talking, or simply enjoying the warmth of each other's presence. What had once been a solitary ranch had transformed into a vibrant home, filled with laughter, learning, and love. As Christmas approached, the family prepared to celebrate together. Emily and Thomas had planned a small but heartfelt celebration. making decorations from materials found around the ranch, baking simple treats, and preparing a modest feast. The children were eager participants, their excitement palpable as they hung handmade ornaments, laid the table, and helped prepare the meal. This festive occasion marked the first major holiday they had experienced as a family, and it became a symbol of how far they had come since that cold night before Thanksgiving when they had first knocked on Thomas's door. On Christmas morning, the children awoke to find small gifts carefully placed for them: a pair of warm mittens for Tom, a handmade doll for Anna, and a book for Lily. The gesture, though modest, reflected the care and thoughtfulness of Thomas and Emily. The children's laughter and joyful exclamations filled the house, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt the deep comfort of knowing that her family was truly safe, loved, and cared for. The act of giving and receiving gifts was not just a celebration of the holiday, but a reflection of the bonds they had forged and the happiness they had discovered in one another. Throughout the day, the family shared stories of the past, dreams for the future, and reflections on the journey that had brought them together. Emily spoke of her gratitude for Thomas's generosity and courage, acknowledging how his willingness to open his home had changed their lives forever. Thomas, in turn, expressed his admiration for Emily's strength, resilience, and devotion to her children, recognizing that together they had created a home that was greater than the sum of its parts. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields, Thomas and Emily stood together, watching the children play near the barn. The ranch, once a place of solitude, was now alive with the presence of family. The wind carried the faint sounds of laughter and joy, mingling with the peaceful hum of the winter night. Thomas realized that the ranch had not only become a sanctuary for Emily and her children, but also for himself, a place where he had found companionship, purpose, and the deep fulfillment of belonging. The story's resolution is marked by the affirmation of shared love and trust. The family had overcome hunger, fear, and uncertainty, and in the process, they had discovered that the most important foundation of life was human connection. Through acts of kindness, guidance, protection, and shared labor, they had built a home where everyone had a role, where every heart mattered, and where joy could flourish even in the harshest conditions. The children, now thriving, had begun to understand the values of compassion, resilience, and gratitude. They had experienced the impact of selfless care and learned to appreciate the sacrifices and efforts of those who loved them. Emily, witnessing their growth and happiness, felt an unshakable sense of peace and hope, knowing that her children were safe, nurtured, and happy. Thomas, who had once faced life in solitude, discovered the joy of shared responsibility and the warmth of a family united not by circumstance, but by choice. As night fell on the ranch, the family gathered around the hearth one last time before bed, the fire casting a gentle glow across their faces. They reflected on the journey that had brought them together, from a desperate knock on the ranch door to a home filled with warmth, love, and laughter. The story concluded not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with the quiet, enduring presence of a family that had found one another through kindness, courage, and the willingness to open their hearts. In the end, the ranch stood as a symbol of hope and transformation. A place that had once represented solitude had become a haven where a mother and her children could flourish, and where a rancher had discovered the joy of shared life and love. Their future, though still subject to the uncertainties of life on the plains, was now anchored in security, trust, and the bonds of family. The story closed on a note of optimism, a reminder that compassion, understanding, and commitment could create a lasting home, heal old wounds, and forge relationships that would endure through the harshest of times.